Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us a story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
You've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast. Welcome to the Waiting List podcast, where I, Lung Lung, and Jacqueline am very happy to welcome Nick D, a collector from the United States, California specifically. Welcome, Nick, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Right. I think this shows how, to some extent, the power of Clubhouse and the fact that it does literally give many Instagrammers, I know you're not a KOL and you probably don't like that term, but a voice to match the images to a person. And you actually, can actually hear that person. Nick is someone that I actually was totally unaware of until I actually went onto Clubhouse, which I think you're quite active on. And especially after hearing you speak on it, I thought we have to get you on. Yeah. So
I appreciate it.
Before we get into the meat of this interview, I would also like to say that we have had a few messages coming through on Instagram that have been incredibly touching. It's always great to hear from you, and I can assure anybody that messages to any of us, the whole team knows about it, and it really does have the potential to make your day. So it's really great. Thank you very much for all the support we're getting. We know we aren't the most professional and probably neither the most PC, but we definitely work hard in trying to make the great content for you guys. Right. So without further ado, let's get into it. And we're going to go straight into watches. So we were discussing before we went online about the Marvel AP collab. But that reminds me, all watch collectors have an origin story. How did Nick D get into the wonderful world of watch collecting?
Wonderful world indeed. It all started when I was in college, actually. I was going to college for computer science, and a buddy of mine, Joe, in college, he was the first person to introduce me to mechanical watches in general. And being young and in computers, folks in my career path tend to get a little sucked into things. And so eventually there's kind of this, the pendulum swings in another direction, I guess you could say, where you start to investigate analog things more often. So whether it be cars or in my case, actually, I was reminded of this yesterday. I have a huge interest in pinball machines. And over the last couple of years, I've actually bought and restored pinball machines. And I'm talking about like the old 80s and 90s pinball machines, where there's lots of machinery and analog electronics inside of it. But the specific thing about pinball machines I like is the fact that there's a lot of moving parts. There's everything from gears and all these little complications that they would put in pinball machines. And it kind of reminded me actually of the different manufacturers of watches and watch movements. But I was actually working at my first big job. It was about 2007 in Silicon Valley in San Francisco area. And I was walking by a Tourneau of all things. And the first watch I actually purchased under my buddy Joe's influence was a Breitling Mont Brilliant de Tora. And it had this milky cream dial, and it was an annual calendar. For folks that are unfamiliar with it, if you go back to the 2005 to 2007 era and look that up, and it had the slide rule on it. So it's a Navitimer with annual calendar. And this, analog computer essentially that was on the bezel that you can rotate and do math with. The nerd in me, I was excited. So that was actually one of my first real watch purchases, and it all kind of came together because of my interest in everything from pinball machines to just mechanical engineering and engineering in general, and the influence from my buddy Joe, and the fact that computers are kind of these impersonal machines, and I wanted something real. So that's pretty much the best way I can describe it.
Can we just backtrack a little? Can you just tell our listeners, what do you actually do for a living?
Oh, I work in cybersecurity, computer security. I focus on network security specifically. But yeah, working with computers all day, you tend to, get lost in this impersonal world of bits and bytes, so to speak. So staring at screens all day, occasionally, you want to stare at something else, and whether that's a watch or the inside of a car engine, or everybody's got their hobbies. And for me, it was pinball machines, and then eventually watches.
Yeah, I had a pre-call with Nick, and we did touch on the cybersecurity thing. And one thing that I took out of that was he just used Apple products. And this is a guy that goes around the world doing lectures on that kind of stuff. So, I'm actually kind of interested in data security, my privacy, that kind of stuff. It's a very hot topic, right? And I was just asking him for tips, and he just said, I use my Apple. And to be honest, there's nothing that obviously is 100% safe. But Nick spent most of his, sorry, Nick, I'm talking on your behalf, but I'll just finish.
No, that's quite all right.
Is that he spent most of his childhood breaking things. And so he carried that on into his career in breaking things in software and trying to find like loopholes, I guess, and where things could be compromised. And I just find that amazing, because you're a person also similar to the Mark Zuckerberg kind of scenario, where you didn't even finish your studies and you went straight to Silicon Valley, and you kind of done really well for yourself, right? Was that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it these days, but for sure, when I got my first job offer before I finished university, so I just took it and figured, I can always go back if I need to. And I never ended up finishing my degree, but I think my watch hobby and pinball hobby and other things got in the way. So yeah, along those lines, though, it was an interest in getting away from computers and finding another hobby that had nothing to do with computers. So pinball machines, whether it's the old school ones from like the 70s, I used to take them apart, put them back together. As a child, I did the same thing with like VCRs and stuff. I've always had an interest in these things. And of course, all this starts to translate into interest in watches. Yeah, I mean, anything
what are they?
Take apart.
Everybody's going to be saying, what are they?
I just aged myself. I definitely gave away my age just now. Jacqueline's like, what's a VCR?
Yeah, what is it?
Are you serious?
Are you serious? You actually don't know? Is that a joke? Or you don't know what it is?
What's a VCR?
Oh my God.
We're gonna have that conversation after the podcast. Don't worry about it. No, we'll just let everybody at home is laughing right now.
It sounds so familiar. Like, is that virtual reality?
Absolutely. It's 100% virtual reality.
It's even sharper.
Yeah.
Like,
way sharper.
I've had these growing up. I remember, but I was very young when I had these.
I feel super old right now.
I'm gonna cut that part out.
I think you should. I vote to leave it in. But
right. But you mentioned something in your previous answer, Nick, about one thing that you said. You kind of said it dismissively, but people doing tech, they'd like to go into things deep. Is that something you see across the board? That so far, so much so that you think it's kind of like natural or very common? And also, out of all the things you could get into, like pinballs, things, like what is it about things? Because I know you're into a lot of things, a lot of expensive things. What kind of gets your attention that makes you want to deep dive into these things?
Just the history of them, actually. That's a good question, though. And yes, when it comes to like doing either any kind of computer science studies, an attention to detail and being able to read a lot and do lots of research, all of these things translate very well into, let's say, reading the service manual of a pinball machine, or deep diving into the history of a particular watch brand, or deep diving into the technical aspects of watch collecting and movements and stuff. Whether it's an old programming language, historical computers, which some people rebuild. Like, for instance, I was talking about repairing and refinishing pinball machines. Some people find these old computers that nobody's turned on for 40 years, and they get them working again. And some people go down and collect specific vintage watches and preserve them, I guess you could say. So collecting in general, whether it be, again, pinball machines, old computers, or vintage watches, all these people have the same personality traits, right? You don't collect one of everything of a particular brand of watch and not know tons about its history. At least I would hope so. So
Yeah, I would actually absolutely agree with that. Do you think, actually, we touched on it and we had a laugh, which is the VCR stuff, and
yes.
you mentioned about old computers. Do you think those in the future will be highly desirable as well? Because they're electronic, and there's that myth, or there's a controversy. Oh, because it's electronic, maybe they're not so collectible. There's less analog. But do you see, let's say, old Sony Walkmans, VCRs, even the old consoles like the early Nintendos, Famicoms, all these things, first Apple computers, to be very highly collectible in the future?
Oh, well, we know that, retro video games and old video game consoles are very highly collectible. Some people spend lots of money on original Nintendo games. If they're in high quality. Like, I think a wrapped Mario Brothers for a Nintendo Entertainment System, the original NES, go to auction occasionally. And, if it's still wrapped in the original plastic and stuff. People collect VHS tapes, and Laserdiscs still, although those aren't as valuable, I suppose. And yeah, I think original Macintosh computers from the 70s and 80s definitely are collectible, and people preserve them for sure.
Would that be of interest to you, coming from the tech side anyway? Or do you still have that need to go, do you know what, I need something more analog?
Oh no, I certainly love the analog side of things, of course. Like that's why I got into watches, right? But I guess for a counterexample is a friend of mine found an original Pixar image computer, and I guess I know this is a little off topic from watches, but for those listening, before Pixar made movies like Toy Story and such, they made computers, and they didn't make a whole lot of them, but if they're pretty historically relevant. They're very historically what's the word? Important in the timeline of computers. Significant. Yeah. Yes, sorry. I'm so old, as Jacqueline has pointed out, that I'm forgetting my train of thought. Anyway, the Pixar image computer. Not going to get too deep into it, obviously, but it's there isn't a lot of them, and people sometimes bring them back from the dead and repair them, and some of them are even in computer museums. So
Wow.
For something that is just almost a 50-year-old computer, I think 40 years old, the fact that it's it's not a Dufour watch, it's not it's not a famous example of anything other than an old computer, but it's just very rare, and yeah, they're in museums and stuff. So yes, everything is collectible if there is a group of people that are dedicated to it, I guess you could say.
Right. So bringing this back to watches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting your first watch doesn't mean that you're necessarily into the hobby. I mean, anybody can get one watch, right? So what made you get the second watch, and how long was that delay between getting that first watch to the second watch? And then when did it kind of go really bad into the rabbit hole?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's going to be a basic story. Everybody's got an Omega Speedmaster, and my second watch after the Breitling was an Omega Speedmaster. I forget how long after it was. I still own it, and I think everybody in their watch collecting journey gets a Speedmaster. And I'm a aviation enthusiast. I'm a space nerd. Of course, the connection of the Omega Speedmaster to NASA and the Apollo space missions was an obvious historical thing of interest for me. And I was like, well, this looks like a beautiful watch with a connection to space. Sign me up, and I mean, that was my second purchase. I literally, I am just doing all of the usual watch collecting steps, as I was starting my journey. But I think we can all agree that you need exposure to these things to understand what's out there and what you like. And this is, of course, before the days, I believe, of Instagram and that sort of thing. So there really wasn't much social media out there, at least that I was a part of, that was kind of, talking about this stuff. It was still kind of the early days before all these brands and all these collectors got on Instagram and on social media and started really sharing their hobbies. So for me, I was being exposed to all the stuff from Jacqueline. You're going to love this. Magazines. They would print them and they put all the pictures. You could buy it at a bookstore. So I remember buying like Revolution magazine and Watch Time and stuff, and reading those, and that's where I would get my information. And of
I remember
course,
you had to do this thing called turning a page,
yeah, yeah, you couldn't
right?
just scroll through the whole
Yeah,
thing. You had to
like
actually,
there was this thing, Jacqueline, called turning the page, where you had to like these magazines had like very, very thin physical pages, and you had to get your fingernail on the one to flip it over to go to the other side to read the other page. So it wasn't just like clean your thumb so it's not too oily and then swipe on the screen. Like it was a totally different world, Jacqueline. But
Jacqueline's
Norman,
like,
no.
please jump in.
Jacqueline's like trying to prove that she has a book, but please put your dad's book away. Right. So I'm curious, for someone that's
Mhm.
in tech, do you actually prefer the older days where you have to go out, buy a magazine, feel and touch these watches, or do you prefer how it's evolved into this whole Instagram and everything being so easy to see and browse and discuss online?
Well, so I always thought that maybe there was a bit of decision paralysis, where basically we're all kind of overexposed to these watches and watch brands and things from social media, and maybe perhaps this overexposure either gives us fatigue, or perhaps there's so much to look at and so much to absorb that you become kind of paralyzed in decision making. And I was wondering exactly what you're asking. I asked a designer friend of mine this exact question. I said, this individual works in the watch industry and designs watches over a very long career. And I asked him, do you like the days before, the internet was part of your life, where, your only exposure to different designs was art books and going to the library and getting, large format art books and coffee table books. And that was your only source of inspiration, whether it be historical or contemporary or whatever, versus, let's say, Instagram. Do you think that designers today are kind of overexposed to designs and other watch brands to the point where they've seen it all and maybe they're not realizing it, but they're being influenced by this and not really designing anything original anymore? So is Instagram and social media and all this exposure a good thing or a bad thing from a design perspective? And I was expecting him to say the opposite, that it was a bad thing. Instead, he said it's a fantastic thing, and that a good designer will always design good things, and it's up to the designer to interpret, the stuff and things they're seeing. So I found that very interesting, and I actually prefer today. I like being able to be exposed to as many things as possible, because I know we all say collect what you love and buy what you love, but if you don't know what you love, how are you going to know? And so back when I started my watch collecting journey, I had only been exposed to a few things. And so walking around that Tourneau shop many years ago, I didn't know what I was looking at. I was just starting my journey. I've had 15 years now to absorb and look at things and do a lot of research, and my tastes have evolved. So I think I prefer today, where I can get exposed to brands like Bronefeld, which definitely wouldn't have been probably, in a watch magazine early on. But I can get direct exposure, on Instagram, and other people, other collectors that are able to share their entire collections now, where before it was on forums.
You mentioned like Omega, and I totally agree. When you start your watch journey, it is kind of, you've got those iconic models, right? They're iconic for a reason. And I think it's a good basis of having a foundation for your knowledge to get familiar with those pieces. But if we're talking about design, and particularly with Omega, the Moonwatch is very closely linked with that brand. You've got space, which is, as you said, it is kind of used by a lot of brands to that story, at least that branding side, to attract new watch collectors. MB&F just comes to mind. They focus on space. Urwerk, they kind of focus on space. Obviously, you have the Moonwatch. But, when we talk about design of the Moonwatch, do you think Omega actually numbs the consumer with all these limited editions and actually dilutes that story of the Moonwatch? That makes it almost less special.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this a lot on Clubhouse, about criticizing a lot of these brands for releasing so many limited editions. And to be honest, it never really affected me. I never really bought a limited edition watch, to be honest. And I know Omega kind of gets a lot of flack for releasing so many limited editions. I mean, there really is one true, moon watch, right? And the Hesalite Speedmaster. And there's always an option there. It's always been there in their collection. I don't think limited editions are as big of a problem as people think, to be honest. They are limited. And as long as they keep, that purest watch around and available to people, it was never, an Omega Speedmaster is not like a 15202 jumbo or anything like that. You can get them, and it never was so hard to get at any point in its time, and at least contemporary, that it had that kind of mythology around it. It was always a very accessible watch. So for being something that's so iconic and being accessible, I think it's fantastic. If they want to have all these limited editions, that's their choice. Does it dilute the brand, or does it change the way I see Omega? Not at all. I don't care. That's just me. Although some people seem to care, and it's been a hotly debated topic on Clubhouse for sure. Right.
What's the other side then? That's your contention. But what's the argument on the other side for those that don't know? Is it literally that it's too many? Is that just it, or is there more to it?
I mean, that they're milking it, right? That's
the
what
thing
it gets down to. Yeah. I don't think you can milk something like that enough. To be perfectly honest, it's just a cool story. I mean, let's put it this way: NASA tested all these different watches, and the Speedmaster is the one that passed their tests. That's all. And they chose it because it was going to survive space travel. And yes, if you know the story, the crystal popped off one of the watches on one of the moon missions.
I don't know that story.
Oh yeah, the crystal popped off, if I'm not mistaken, on one of the Speedmasters on one of the moon missions. However, I mean, so what? I think people put way too much weight on these things. Like, for instance, it's kind of a joke that a Speedmaster can't go near water. This is ridiculous. I get it that people make this joke a lot, and I've talked to people, actual watchmakers and stuff, and it's just I've taken my Speedmaster in a pool, and it's fine, right? I don't know why everybody gets so bent out of shape about it. It's very strange what people in any community, whether it be pinball, watches, retro computers, everybody's got something to complain about, and it's really funny. But if you stop, think, and look at things, and do a little bit of research, it's really not the end of the world.
Mm-hmm. Jacqueline, you have something to add?
I was gonna say, like, how come Speedmasters can't go near water?
I don't know. That's the joke people make, because
is it a myth?
Because I've never heard about that.
Or is it a truth? Yeah.
Well, I don't believe it's very. Was it rated to 5 ATMs? It's like, if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe it's even 3. And also it doesn't have a screw down crown, of course. And you're not supposed to. Yeah, and you're not supposed to operate the pushers, of course, when you're underwater. They make the joke that at least I've seen it on Instagram a lot, where the Omega Speedmaster can go to the moon, but don't get it in a puddle. And it's just, I can't roll my eyes hard enough. There's definitely pros and cons to social media and any collecting community, whether again pinball or watches or whatever. And yeah, it's funny. And by the way, getting back to my other point about what you were saying long about like Instagram and social media and exposing us to new things, I have learned all sorts of things about Cartier from Jacqueline's Instagram. It's something that I never really paid much attention to until I started browsing through her Instagram, which is fantastic. And I've showed my wife, I've introduced her to all these different vintage references. And this is just a great example of, as I started to get to know more and more people and their accounts.
Are we not fantastic?
You're all fantastic. All absolutely fantastic.
That's not very nice, is it?
But this is a fantastic collection.
It's not very nice for you guys to say that I smell.
I did not say
Look,
that.
yeah, there's some stuff which is myth and some stuff which is fact, right? And yours is the latter. Okay, that's not being nice. It's not being nice. It's just a fact, right?
And Jacqueline,
I'm trying to help you.
that the rest of your the rest of your collection on Instagram is fantastic. The Star Wheel Audemars Piguet that you have, and the Tantalum one. I've gone through it many times, and I greatly appreciate it. And it has actually exposed me more and more to Cartier as a brand and its vintage references. And this is something I saw, noticed, got exposed to, started to go and research more and more. Something I never really considered. And for somebody who's been collecting watches for a long time, there's always something new to learn.
Does that mean my collection on Instagram isn't that good?
Oh, it's all fantastic.
Just shut the fuck up.
I'm just saying.
Wait, I am going to get cordoned off, right, for severe bullying. Yeah, like nobody is exempt from it. But no, anyway, back to this. One of the things you can't deny on the moon watch, right, is the movement. You know, if you go back to the original 3-2-1 movement based off the Lemania, that is one of the key components of that watch. And it's also what you like in watches, right? The movement side is the side that really attracted you to watches, if I'm not wrong. What is it about movements that really dig you?
Yeah, movements in general, they're basically, to me, watches and watch movements are just, little computers, little analog computers, whether they're just telling the time or, obviously folks who have seen my Instagram know that I just recently got my first Perpetual Calendar, which to me is an amazing deal because it's a milestone for me personally. And that is just, instead of programming a computer with computer language, with computer code, it's programming a mechanical computer with gears and teeth, and the placement of those teeth is programming a perpetual calendar to skip over certain days, or every 4 years there's a leap year. From a computer engineering or engineering standpoint in general, that's what these things are to me. It's amazing, and I just find this fascinating. Then there's all these wild complications like the sunrise, sunset, and high tide, low tide complication that Vacheron has in one of their astronomy watches. I think it's some grand complication that they made, I think a few years ago, or maybe recently. It's amazing. They actually have to calibrate that movement for your local city so that everything is accurate, because you need to know your longitude and latitude for all these things to actually work. And it's all just a function of the moon phase. And so I just find it that, we've got these little mechanical computers on your wrist, and you program them with gears. That's, to me, is just an amazing thing that I think people overlook.
I know you got that piece recently, and on behalf of the team, I just want to say congratulations.
Yeah.
I know it means a lot for you to have that piece, and I think when I see those pieces going to the right collector,
not the Vacheron.
The Perpetual.
Yeah, sorry.
The Perpetual Calendar. Yeah.
The steel QP from AP. I know it means a lot to you, and it makes me happy that a piece like that goes to a collector like you that actually values it, and not to some reseller or somebody trying to flip it, or a VIP that is just buying and just pumping down money down the brand, but then puts it in an insurance box. You wear that piece, you enjoy it, you bang on about it. I remember when you first got it, you're direct messaging me. Not only was an Instagram post not sufficient for you to share that joy, I was also privy to a private message with you telling me that you just got this. And I love that enthusiasm within the watch community. Yeah. I think it's really great. So yeah, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I by the way, I just want to say that I've heard that feedback from more than one person now, where they literally were like, this is great, congratulations. I'm glad a collector is getting it that appreciates it instead of like a dealer or something. And I was just wow, that is a common thread amongst everybody who's seeing my new watch arrival. I was hoping people would be a little bit more optimistic about things, but I am just as happy to have it, and I wear it every day. I absolutely love it. I'm still in that honeymoon phase where I'm very, very careful with it still. Like, for instance, living by the beach, I would hate to get sand onto that beautiful AP bracelet and finish. So I tend to baby it a little bit, but I do wear it every day around the house. And it just means the world to me. I know that we all have our little milestones in life. And for me, being fortunate enough to purchase my first Perpetual Calendar, but not only that, have it be from Audemars Piguet, and it be the Royal Oak reference is just a dream come true for me. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
you mentioned that watches are like mechanical computers to you. You know, the whole complication of how making a perpetual calendar is so complicated, and how the gears have to work, synchronized together to get the perfect result in the end. It is just, mind-boggling. Is that the complication that astounds you the most?
They all astound me, actually. The perpetual calendar being the one that I like because I like astronomy and I'm just a science nerd. And that specific complication is just something that I've always been fascinated by. Then there's like these grand complications, like I mentioned, the Vacheron that had the sunset, sunrise, high tide, low tide, and the other astronomy watches that are out there. There are a bunch from all different brands. But I think the one that most fascinates me would be a grand sonnerie. I think you asked me once, like, where do I go from here in my collecting journey? I'd love to get a minute repeater one day. I think that would be my next big milestone. I think everyone can kind of agree that that's like kind of the next big thing. That would be quite the leap, of course. But I look forward to one day being able to direct message you and say, dude, look what I got, and it'd be my first minute repeater or something.
You don't say that. You simply record the sound. Voice memo.
That's right. Yes, I'll just simply
do it in a classy way.
Yeah.
Just record the sound. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I find it hilarious that all the watch community has flocked to Clubhouse, an audio only, social media app, essentially, where we all talk about watches, things that are, have a design to them, and occasionally somebody will have a minute repeater and just chime it and flex on everybody. It's hilarious. I love it. But the one that impresses me the most just recently was the Patek. What reference is it? It's their new Grand Sonnerie, the 6301 in platinum, the one where you press the button on the crown, and that's what triggers the minute repeater. If folks go and Google that, of course, I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. That is such an amazing piece. I absolutely, it just looks so stealth too, with that black dial, with the platinum metal. Fantastic piece.
They made a really good movie about that on YouTube.
Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah, it was so good.
Long.
So two things. One, I just want to say that what you said earlier on, like, totally resonates with me. Like, that's the whole reason I'm so into watches. Like, the fact that you think so many years ago they had to come up with this kind of mechanical gears that can do that. You don't have to wind your watch for like 99 years, 100 years, right? So that's the romantic part of this whole with watch and watchmaking that I find fascinating. But the second thing I'm very curious about is because you're still on a high with this AP getting your perpetual calendar, right? How long do you think it will take before, because you're now already mentioning Patek, right? For me, it took so long for me to say, okay, it's time to explore other brands. Because I know, like, AP, I'm sure you know this too, they also just came up with their minute repeater, right?
Yes.
So how long do you think it will take for you to say, I'm ready to explore another brand?
I have other brands, and I know what you mean as well. It's funny because this is another thing I've been thinking about a lot. I found that I don't like leather straps very much. I tend towards metal bracelets, and this has influenced my decision making a lot, obviously. And Patek only makes leather straps. There are only so many watch brands out there that make integrated metal bracelets and things like that. The reason is because it just between I like my Breitling was a leather strap, and I found that in the summer, in the heat or something, if my wrist swells a little bit, it becomes uncomfortable. And I guess that kind of changed the way that I look at my purchase choices. I can appreciate dress watches, which is what I consider Patek to be. I would love to be able to say that I could collect these watches just purely for how amazing they are, the movement, the complication, whatever. But I actually wear my watches, and so it's got to be first and foremost practical for my purposes. And I absolutely want to, let's say, buy my first Patek, and I love the fact that they just released the new Calatrava, with the new movements that are brand new movement, fits the case. It's a beautiful, simple time only piece. It's fantastic. Except it's got this leather strap, and I just remember the days of living in New England in the summer with my Breitling, or I have a Nomos Tangente, also leather strap, and I just always find these leather straps to be so constricting on my wrist, and it gets uncomfortable. I usually take it off. I gotta wear these watches. I buy these watches to wear them, and if I can't wear it all the time, then it tends to start to sit around. So I'm a firm believer in a watch serving its purpose, meaning to actually sit on a wrist and do its function. And so that's the difference, I guess, between a collector and somebody like myself, where a collector is going to want to collect like one of everything, one of every reference. Like Jacqueline has an amazing collection of Cartier watches and a diverse selection of those references. I am not collecting one of everything, right? We all see it in the community. There's those Rolex Submariner collectors that have one of everything. That is dedication. That is true dedication. But I do wear them. That's what they ultimately are there for.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered those straps which are kind of like rubbery silicone on the inside, but have that leather on the kind of on the outside? So they're kind of a hybrid, because then you would perhaps get that sweat, you'd be okay, right? Or not?
Yeah. But I mean, the purist in me doesn't want to swap out a strap on something that is as beautiful as a Patek. It's conflicting to me. However, the flip side of that is the practical side of me, the pragmatist, would swap out the strap, put that strap away, and wear the watch. You're right. I guess that's something I should probably explore, believe it or not. But I think you get my point. At the end of the day, I want to wear my watches. I don't want them to just sit around, and so that's I can wear my Audemars Piguet QP out and about. I can actually put it on the wrist and go anywhere with it. And just for me, leather straps just don't work out. But that's just a personal preference at the end of the day.
Right, I want to give your AP Perpetual the floor again, because I know how much you love that piece. But there's probably people out there that don't know that AP has a strong bond with Perpetual Calendar, right? Maybe you could tell the audience something about that.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, they were the first to include something that kind of seems obvious. While other brands have been making Perpetual Calendar, either pocket watches or wristwatches, they included a leap year indicator. They were the first to do that. I forget what year they did that in, but it was in one of their early references. And this is kind of an important thing to include, because if you don't know what leap year you're in, it can then become very difficult to set your watch appropriately. So in the past, Perpetual calendars that didn't have a leap year indicator, you'd have to bring into the watchmaker to have it set if it stopped and you didn't know, what cycle you were in. So they've been very famous for creating their ultra thin perpetual calendar based on the 2121 movement, which Patek, VC, and AP have all used in the past. And I think what was it, 1978, I believe, is when they first had the modern reference watch. And I remember there was an AP designer, I forget her name. Everyone, I'm sorry?
It's Jacqueline, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the 70s,
among other people.
Among other people, but she is credited. She is credited with like being the mother of the.
That's right. Yeah.
Of the Royal Oak, and I think I've read a lot about this. Right, I've read through the history of this a lot, and that's just one of the other things that I find interesting. The people behind all these watches and the people that are kind of lost to history. Everybody knows who Gerald Genta is. Everybody knows the history of these things. But it's these other people that really made these watches what they are today, and I believe she's credited with being, a lot of firsts at AP. I also just like the fact that Audemars Piguet has been trying to push the envelope on everything they do, and going back, the fit and finish specifically of these watches is just, I've always found it so amazing. I'm just at a loss for words. I've stared at my QP for hours now. I think if you were to add up all the time, and I think we can all agree that you can get lost in the dial of the watch, and we've all done it.
I think it was quite a moment there where you actually were lost for words, because so far in the podcast you haven't been lost for words. But when it talks about the QP, I could really feel it coming through you. You know, that was amazing. But I'm getting that basically with the design of the RO and the integrated bracelet, and the Perpetual Calendar. Being a space nerd, it ticks all the boxes for you, right?
It certainly does. Yeah. No, it does.
And that's why you would go AP, because PP don't offer that, VC don't offer that, but AP does, right? And I think, you know, to get this kind of piece, you obviously have a very watertight relationship with AP. How important is that relationship to you?
Well, it's very important. I think there's obviously in the watch collecting community and in general, we all know that there's people who are true collectors and people who buy investment pieces and things like that. I don't really consider myself to be in any of those categories at all. I don't deal watches. I don't collect one of everything. I collect to wear, right? I buy to wear, that is. But what's interesting is when I first started developing my relationship with Audemars Piguet, and I bought my first watch was I was very fortunate enough to get an allocation for a 15500, and so of course I immediately bought that and continued my relationship. And I'm in New York all the time for work and other reasons, and one thing led to another, and eventually my wife, who designs her own jewelry sometimes. She works with a jeweler, designs her own jewelry pieces. She appreciates watches as well. And eventually, again, through exposure, right? Somebody who previously had just a Reverso, and by the way, she also owns a beautiful, I believe it's 28 millimeter date just Rolex, yellow gold with the fluted bezel. It's a beautiful, elegant watch. Looks beautiful on her wrist. But then she saw my Royal Oak, and then she started looking at the webpage, and then this became a very expensive endeavor. Yes. The joke on Clubhouse and other discussions is, you know, if you really want to go down this road, don't introduce your wife to horses and watches. Those are two things that can get very expensive very quickly.
I got better advice. When you look at the AP page, you shouldn't go incognito just for porn. You should use it for AP pages and Patek pages. That's a safer option. Keep it away from your history.
No, she knows she knows all about my watch habit, but she caught the bug as well. So we were in New York City, and she purchased the frosted rose gold the gold dial 37 millimeter. And I know, Lung, you have the Carolina Bucci mirrored dial. So it's that reference, but with just the Grand Tapisserie dial and with the gold dial color. It's a beautiful watch, and I think people photos cannot do this justice. Until I actually saw the frosted gold finish in person, I didn't realize how beautiful it looked. And it sparkles, and especially when it's brand new and it's in sunlight or indoors, it looks like it's diamonds. It's unbelievable. And so this thing just looks like $1 billion on your wrist. And so when she's wearing a black dress and she's looking absolutely stunning, and then you add a frosted gold Royal Oak to the wrist, it just that gold on black look is just an amazing combination. It
elevates.
It's out of this world. And you have to see these things in person, right? And again, it was all about exposure. I never gave the frosted gold stuff a second thought because it just wasn't for me until we saw it in person. We purchased it, and it's her absolute favorite watch. She loves the design as well. The avant-garde, the royal oak shape design, the integrated bracelet, everything about it is within our tastes. Whether it be that, the rest of our furniture. I'm sitting in my bedroom right now, and we have these. People can't see it, but I'm going to show you guys. This is an Italian lamp.
Cool.
I collect lamps. This is from the 50s, and
That's really
on the other
cool.
side of me, we collect different mirrors because the frames that we like. All of these things are influence my tastes, the royal oak just speaks to me. And like you said, Daniel, it's it checks all the boxes. It checks all the boxes for me. Some people like the classical look of Patek. I like the modern look of a royal oak.
I will say I probably didn't. I actually didn't see the frosted gold until Long Long wore it, and coupled with how Long Long dresses anyway, the watch really elevates the whole outfit enough to, as a guy who I'm not even interested in that watch, but as a whole aesthetic. So not just seeing the watch, having the watch in context with the dress, the person, everything. Makes you stare. I mean, that's my excuse for staring at Long Long anyway. But I was just staring at the watch, and I was like, "Yeah, unashamed. Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, wow. Yeah."
Now, that
really
is
good.
Absolutely the truth.
It is, right? You know what I mean? When you described your wife, that's exactly how I felt when I saw that piece. And then, when she's done you with the Carolina Bucci, she then comes the next day with the open worked frosted gold, as if that wasn't enough to send you over the edge. It's like, what? My mind can't compute.
Yeah.
And you can only really do that with gold too, because of the luster of gold. You
Yeah.
wouldn't do a frosted finish with steel. You wouldn't do a frosted finish. They don't do a frosted finish with platinum because that's kind of
no. It's just rose gold and white gold.
And white gold, yeah. And the white gold, having seen the frosted gold in person and actually having one next to me right now, and I can only imagine what a white frosted gold finish on an open work dial looks like in the flesh. I've never actually seen that piece in person, but I can put the two things together in my head, and this is something that AP does very well. They really do check the
flashlight. When you shine a flashlight on the frosted royal oak, especially the one in white gold, from a distance, it just looks like you have a blinged out watch. I remember,
but it's not though, right?
It's not. It's totally just
because it has a little bit of class. It's class compared to that. Yeah,
it plays mind games because my mom. So I got my mom. Her royal oak is the frosted 37, but with the white dial instead of the rose gold dial, and then we were able to find both of them in Milan, I think in 2017. And then we were deciding between the white gold or the rose gold, because I think the white gold was more expensive by like a couple of $1,000. But then when we were looking at it through the boutique's light, it was so loud. The white one, it from a distance, it literally just looks like you have a buzz down royal oak. And to her, it wasn't. It was too much. So then she went with the rose gold, but then she doesn't like. This is why I can't wait to go back because I'm gonna convince her to give me that watch or trade or something. I wear it.
Is that a way to say steal?
Yeah.
I was like, you're saying you want to steal that watch, right?
Yeah.
I guess the point here is that to anybody listening and hearing either myself or others gush about these things, you have to see them in person. And the same goes for any other impressive watch. Photos just don't do these things justice. The exposure to them, I mean, there are great photographers out there, and the watch community has got this amazing overlap of people with photographic skills, taking amazing photos. And I really appreciate those people and their accounts because they take, they contextualize these watches in very interesting ways. One of my favorite accounts is, I forget the exact name of it, but I'm sure everybody follows it. It's the Watches and Fake Cars account. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Okay. I just love the way all of these different watches are presented on these different accounts. And some of them are even themed, like the Watches and Fake Cars guy. amazing photography. And that's one of the things, getting back to your earlier point about, if Instagram, and it's what you make of it. If you can get inundated and fatigued from all of this content coming at you, but you got to make the most of it. You got to make the best of it. And I use that to explore these brands.
I think that's a perfect place to end this podcast. Fantastic. But not before we give you a little quick fire, Nick. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Right. Now, you are a bit of a nerd, and I think you come across as like you're quite smart as well. So I'm going to challenge you. Can you explain how to use a tachymeter in a minute?
I'd say that's probably the most misrepresented thing that people try to explain, and they fail at it so much. Because you're right, being a nerd, people think that it just represents speed, but it can also do distance, and it can also actually do the rate of something happening over an hour. All it is, I don't know why people think it's just speed or whatever, but did you know that a tachymeter scale on the outside of the bezel is a neutral scale? It can do miles per hour, kilometers. It can do meters. It can do
of course
miles.
I knew that. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it doesn't just do.
What the fuck's a neutral scale? No, I know.
Yeah.
Well, relatively neutral for what it's measuring, right? So, for instance, never mind the speed and distance. Okay, let's just break it down to what it really is. If I told Daniel to go and do a thing, and I timed him, and it took him 30 seconds. Okay, let me ask you this, since you put me on the spot. What is the value of a tachymeter reading at 30 seconds at the 6 o'clock position?
Don't know.
No, I just know like this equation that's like T divided by 3,600, and I'm already like, what? so at the 6 o'clock, it should be 120. So if I send Daniel out to go do a thing, and it takes him exactly 30 seconds to do it, then I know he can do. Yes, exactly. Then I know you can do that thing 120 times in an hour. Okay.
I can't, but okay.
So that's all that is. So if you go out and it takes you until the second hand reaches the 80, on the bezel, then you can do 80 of those things in an hour. And that's all this thing is measuring. It's just measuring the rate of something happening in an hour. So for instance,
it's irrelevant. Oh, okay.
Cool.
Okay.
So that's one way of looking at it. So if I had to explain it to like a kid, although that would probably be lost on him, I would explain it like that. So never mind speed, never mind measuring speed or distance or whatever. Just you can use that to measure the rate something occurs in an hour. And in this case, if it takes you 30 seconds and it's pointing at 120, it means that you can do 120 of those things in 1 hour. If it's pointing at the 80, it means you can do 80 of those things in 1 hour. So in this case, a tachymeter would say, if I start the chronometer, if I start the, I start the second hand moving right when I hit a mile marker, and then I stop it at the next mile marker, and it stops at 80, I'm going 80 miles an hour. We know this. But if you're watching something, so that's why, so trying to explain it, in these other terms is can get a little difficult. So again, I go back to the example.
Challenge. It was a challenge.
My answer is forget the speed, forget the distance. It's a neutral scale. Go off and do a thing. If it takes you 30 seconds to do that thing, and wherever your tachymeter is, whatever the readout is, that's how many times you can do that thing in an hour. That's my explanation. Okay. And it sounded like Jacqueline got what I was saying. Once I explained it, you were like,
lot of sense. I'm looking at one right now, and it makes a lot of sense when you're looking at it, because
that's the challenge when you have to do it like just explaining it. But moving on to 2, you are in tech security, right? So give us 3 simple tips on, let's say, your phone that we can adopt to significantly improve the security.
Well, actually, just in general, if something's too good to be true, it probably is. That's like, keep it simple. So if you get text message spam or something stupid like that, don't click on it. Use your head, right? Use your best judgment. That's really when it comes to technology security. Seriously, just use your best judgment. People need to reboot their phones once in a while. That's another thing. Reboot your phone every once in a while. They're computers. They're not perfect either. And so occasionally weird things are going to happen. Reboot your phone once in a while. and it's going to make everything start up fresh. Generally speaking, if you ever have a problem with your phone, just do that. From a security standpoint, doing that just makes, if you think, like, for instance, I've had friends come to me and be like, yo, I think my phone is hacked. And I'm like, did you reboot your phone? And then they'll reboot their phone and the problem will go away. And I'll be like, oh, weird. But seriously, that's what happens sometimes. And then also, to anybody listening, turn on two-factor authentication. I don't mean to get too technical right now, but if you don't know what two-factor or go do some research, turn on two-factor authentication. Everything from Apple, Google, everybody supports it these days. There's no excuse. Turn on two-factor authentication. If you don't know what that is, just go and Google it and look into it, and I'm sure you'll find it out. This is a watch podcast, so if you want cybersecurity tips, go find a cybersecurity podcast.
Right, number 3. You're a collector of furniture, art. You love cars too, and obviously watches. Which is your first love, though? Wife aside, because that's obvious, but wife aside.
Thank you for saying that, because when she's listening to this, she's going to hear that and laugh. And she has an absolutely beautiful laugh, so I'm looking forward to it. And now she's going to be smirking at this comment.
Cool, huge brownie points there. Yeah. I've set you up well good there, mate. Like,
yes, you
need to
have.
thank me.
Yeah. Really good.
Thank you very much, sir. My first love is pinball machines.
Okay.
That is actually something that is very dear to my heart, though they take up a lot of space and they're very noisy. I mean, a lot of space. They're like 200 pounds. So watches are definitely the number one thing on my list these days, followed by furniture, I would say. I'm not, I do appreciate cars, but I don't own anything fancy. I have many friends with fancy cars and I live vicariously through them. So watches definitely are number one on that list. And yes, I do collect furniture, and I've started to get into that journey as well. And by the way, I know this isn't a furniture podcast, but collecting different furniture pieces is kind of like the watch collecting journey. It's exactly the same. I had to get out there, get exposed to things, look at people's Instagrams, learn more about different pieces. I've been learning about lamps lately. I've been nerding out about the design of like lamps made from 1950 to 1979. That is the specific time that I've been looking at recently. And it just like watches, right? We all go back and look at a particular vintage or look at particular years. And so I've just been nerding out on that lately.
Right. Staying on this kind of passion of yours where you've got like furniture and your pinball machine, what is the equivalent of the steel APQP in those two hobbies?
I can answer that for pinball real quick.
Okay.
That would probably be a mint condition Twilight Zone pinball machine. The Twilight Zone pinball machine is very famous for being extremely highly coveted. I think they only made 12,000 of them. But you have to remember, these pinball machines were in bars, they were in arcades, they got beat up a ton. So finding one that is in mint condition, I don't think any exist in mint condition, but people restore them, and they are pretty expensive. I think a mint condition one would probably go for 15 to 20,000. I haven't looked at the prices lately, but just for like a vintage pinball machine, it's kind of impressive. And if you haven't really looked into pinball machines from that era, that was kind of like the analog electronic era, they have all these what they call toys on them, where the ball, the magnets that catch the ball and all these different moving parts and things like that, all those things break over time. And so people who have kept their machines in good condition, those things are super collectible. Absolutely love them. If you want another thing to nerd out on, go start going down the path of pinball machines and pinball machine history. It's fantastic. So a Twilight Zone pinball machine. As for furniture, I can't answer that question because I will admit right now that I don't know enough about what I like in furniture. I just know about the things I have found so far in furniture collecting and design that I like. I don't really know what my grail in the furniture collecting field would be. And also there's subcategories: lamps, mirrors, couches, chairs. I mean, there's so much. It's just ridiculous. So I'm going to punt that question because I really don't know how to answer it, to be honest.
Wow. What I love, is hearing your passion about pinball machines, because it's so like, I don't have any idea of it, but you're obviously so passionate about it. And, I probably will look at a pinball machine and think, what's so good about this? Maybe I'll learn something about it. But just knowing that it's just that there's somebody in there in that kind of field that is into pinball machines. It's just amazing, how we're all different and all quirky in our ways, right?
Yeah.
Next time we see a pinball machine, we're gonna think of you, Nick.
Yeah. There is an amazing, lively community of pinball enthusiasts out there, and there are people who play competitively. There are pinball museums in the United States. There's one specifically in Vegas. I hope it's still open, where they have something like 200 pinball machines all just lined up. It's amazing. I go there and they have, get this, like we've all seen auctions for watches that were like prototypes. Like for instance, I believe there was a Longa one that was in steel and it was auctioned off, and they don't do that. They don't make steel watches. But there was an example of one in steel, and I believe it was a prototype or an early release, something like that. I forget the specifics of it. So that was a big deal because people were like, a steel Longa, that's amazing. There is a prototype of a pinball machine. It's not finished, and it's on display at this pinball museum, except it's playable. It's one of only 2 prototypes ever made. They never made the final version of it. You can actually go there, put a quarter in, and play this incomplete game, pinball game, that is not even beatable because it wasn't programmed fully. And it is doing what pinball machines are meant to do, be played. And that's how I approach, collecting furniture. I'm going to sit on my chair. I'm going to wear my watch. And there are furniture dealers, there are pinball dealers, there are watch dealers, right? I buy to sit, wear, play a pinball machine. That is the purpose of these objects. And if you want to fully appreciate them, you have to do that. You have to wear the watch, sit on the chair, play the pinball machine. That is what they are here to do. And they bring us joy. And they may be kind of, furniture is, you don't need a fancy collectible vintage, chair to sit on, but you can just get a plastic chair, right? We all know this. You can look at your phone to tell the time. We don't need fancy watches. But we have these things for a reason, right? And I think me gushing about all of these different topics probably is the answer to that. Why do we have these things? Because listen to me, I'm just going on and on about it.
Yeah, but that's the great thing about this, and that's the passion that we love to share on this podcast. And that was actually the last question for this podcast. The time just flew by, literally. But I think we're going to have you on again to continue the discussion because we barely actually touched it. And if it's anything like this one, I really can't wait. As always, thank you to our audience for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one. See you guys.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here, please remember to leave a nice review and follow us on Instagram at the Waiting List podcast.